Now? Hello, and welcome everyone to this session here in the Global WOPs Congress on our WOPs reaching the most vulnerable. My name is Julie Perkins, and I'm an officer in charge for UN Habitat's GWOPA Secretariat here in Bonn. This is one of several sessions that we're holding on the theme of access for all in this Congress that's taking place over the next 2 weeks. We're convening this session today with IHE, Waterworks, Water for Life, and WaterAid. These are organizations with a lot of experience in WOPs, and particularly with concrete questions of how to establish and sustain access to water and sanitation services by vulnerable communities. A few housekeeping questions for you. Please know that you can listen to this session in English, French, or Spanish by pressing on the buttons on the right-hand side of your video. If you need to turn down the volume on your on the screen in order to hear only the interpretation language. That's something specific to this platform. You can also join in on the chat with the button on the right bottom of your page. We need to sign in if you're doing it for the first time. Please use email or social media account, and you'll get in there immediately. It works quite well. And please participate with your questions and comments. And that is all. I'm going to hand over now to Emma Lesterhuis, who's been working with VEI as the program coordinator for the Water for Life program. She has 10 years of experience in working with utilities, focusing on increasing access to wash, especially in low-income areas. So over to you, Emma. Thanks.
Good day, everyone. This morning I woke up, I took my shower, I made a cup of coffee using tap water, and I was able to go to the toilet whenever I wanted. In the Netherlands, whenever I want, I have access to affordable and safe drinking water and sanitation. And I think everyone in this session knows, but worldwide, millions of people do not have access to safe and affordable water services, and that's why we are here today. Worldwide, a growing number of water operator partnerships have the explicit aim of increasing access to services for the most vulnerable. In this session, we aim to share our experience of reaching the most vulnerable, and we will discuss about the strengths and limitations of WOPs in bridging the access to the hardest to serve. For this, today we have 5 speakers or panelists to share their experience for this session. Our first speaker I would like to introduce is Faustina Boachi from Ghana. She's a chief manager within the Ghana Water Company and working in a water operator partnerships with VEI for already more than 10 years. Also, we have Puneet Srivastrava. He works as an urban wash advisor at WaterAid UK and is currently joining from India. He's a civil engineer and environmental expert and worked for more than 2 decades on wash issues in national and international projects. Also, we have Gonzalo Mechenguieser. He's a doctor specialist in health systems from the University of Buenos Aires and master in international cooperation from the University of Santiago de Compostela. He's currently working as a manager of international relations in ISA, as parliamentary secretary in the Honorable Deliberative Council of Tiger and CEO of the Institute in the World. Thirdly, we also have Rolien Sasse. She's a senior consultant and mediator with experience on water, climate, and security of over 30 years, experience in international development in Asia, Africa, and Europe. Rolien entered the wash sector as the executive director of the NGO Simafi and serves on the board of Water for Life. Fourth, we also have Mike. Mike is the PROPOR coordinator of the Performance Enhancement Water Utilities Philippines, or PAWIP, a water operator partnership between VEI and 4 water utilities in the central Philippines. Giving access to water for the poor is one of the objectives of the partnership, and it's where Mike devotes his time with water utilities to realize it. That are the speakers of today. And also we have, of course, Hannah Crichton-Smith. She's a senior advisor, system strengthening at WaterAid. Hannah is currently working to embed system strengthening way of working into WaterAid's new global strategy, and supporting country teams to apply system strengthening in projects and programs. Today, she will do the closing reflections. But last but not least, we also have Kevin Ogonda. He's currently working with Kiwasco, a highly driven and committed community development specialist with over 10 years experience in overseeing the implementation of water projects, among others focusing on low-income areas, crafting strategies to enable effective delivery of urban water services, and will be moderator for today. So I would also like to hand over the floor to Kevin. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Tim. And I hope we are all audible and clear. Maybe a feedback will ascertain my continuation. Hello, everyone. Am I audible? Maybe I just get a response from one of the participants before I continue.
Yes, Kevin, you're audible.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I think we, as for the program, we get our first speech from Panet Omar, I hope, and spare me some pronunciations of the name now that they are all ancient, to give us a pitch about what next WOPs planning before we proceed.
Thank you, Kevin. Welcome everyone from WaterAid. I am very happy to join this session today. I will just take you through a little bit of pitching from my side for this session. WaterAid has been working on water operators partnership globally and have implemented implementing about 6 of the water partnership involving one in Ethiopia, the other one with Zambia. Then we had a Thames Loves Malawi, and then we have ongoing the Beacon project between Anglian Water Alliance with Nepal. And we will be also participating in 2 new EU ops opportunity that has come to us, one for Uganda and another one for Nepal. So I will just, based on the experiences of WaterAid, whose mission is to reach the most marginalized and the vulnerable communities, both in rural and urban side, with access to safe water, sanitation, and hygiene services. So my pitch would be basically around, based on the experiences gained, will be on the 5 points. The first one is, I would like to say, is to make WOPs planning and design demand driven. This means that we need to develop robust need assessment studies with key stakeholders and the utilities for designing of WOPs. The second point I would pitch for would be is, we have to make efforts to move towards cultural shift in WOPs. Largely, we see that we have largely the WOPs are driven by mentor and mentee relationship, which is basically a relationship. Sometimes it's not the partnerships of equals, based on the mutual adherence to accountability, transparency, commitment, and mutual respect. So how do we move this cultural shift from mentor mentee to a relationship of partnership of equals based on common principles? The third is that we need to, if we really want to reach to the vulnerable through WOPs, we have to have WOS sector studies focusing on enabling environment. That means looking at the policy and regulation and models to reach effectively to most vulnerable. And this should inform the design of the WOPs. The fourth point I would like to put before you is, how can we build ownership of local community in outreach water services. And that is a very critical aspect which we will talk about today. The fifth point of my pitch is that we need to build up upfront reaching the vulnerable as one of the focus areas. And I'm saying that can it be a non-negotiable area in each of the WOPs, having a momentary utility which has a significant proportion of vulnerable populations in informal settlements and slums living in utilities mandated areas. So can where we have a significant population of the vulnerable people, can we make it that at least one of the focus areas in those designing of WOPs would be as a non-negotiable principle will be reaching to the most vulnerable populations. And I think these will be very, very critical on the way forward on dealing with this issue of reaching the most marginalized and vulnerable effectively in the days to come. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pamet. My opinion, I want us to get to the pitches, then we'll have questions going around. That will give us better guidance and will engage all of us. And so I hope we are together in that. So our next speech will come from Mike from Philippines.
Yes, thank you, Kevin. So I'd like to share to you about how the water utilities reach the most vulnerable here in the Philippines. By the way, once again, I'm Mike Lester Carrion. I am the Pro4 Coordinator and Bawat Coordinator of the Performance Enhancement Water Utilities Philippines. The PWOP is a water operators partnership between BAY and 4 water utilities located in Cebu and Negros Islands in central Philippines. The 4 water utilities are Bogo Water District, Toledo City Water District, Karkar Water District, and Bayawan Water District. Let us talk about the Pro4 project, and let me begin with the poverty and water situation of the Pro4 areas. The beneficiaries of the Pro4 project are generally farmers and fisher folks that live in peri-urban areas. They generally reside in a rural setting, and these families are called indigents. Agriculture is the main source of income for the indigents. Their means of livelihood are also vulnerable to climate, and bad weather can already affect them much. The beneficiaries rely on springs, rivers, hand pumps, and dug wells to have access to water. In a survey, they chiefly are not connected to the water utilities because of affordability. They cannot afford the connection fee, but can afford the monthly bill for the minimum consumption. Another is that some poor areas are far from the service area of the water utilities, which would cost a lot to expand. Moreover, the project identified public schools experiencing limited to no access to water. Recognizing the situation, it leaves a question: how does the WOP reach the vulnerable? This is how we generally did it. While undertaking the Pro4 project, it was recognized that the 4 water utilities, with all their uniqueness, do share 5 areas that are key for the Pro4 to be successful. As such, they form the Pro4 core goals. This helps direct the course of the Pro4 project to reach the most vulnerable, especially towards sustainable access to water and achieve SDG 6. Let us talk about the 5 core goals. The first core goal is the data availability and data management. This is one of the most noticeable activities at the start of the project. The data, for example, is vital for GAD promotion, creation of a comprehensive business plan monitored by MIS, and for Pro4 strategies and investments. So it is also helpful to identify areas where capacity building is needed to a feasible Pro4 project and can be made. It is necessary also to have a Pro4 program in the water utilities. Recently, the country has just released the Philippine Water Supply and Sanitation Master Plan that serves as a roadmap for water service providers, including the water utilities. The human right-based approach indicated in the master plan identifies the water utilities as duty bearers that create conditions for the realization of all human rights for all, especially the most vulnerable. As such, the legal and institutional framework is backed with these principles as a solid basis for the creation of the Pro-Core policy. It also ensures that plans set by the water utility would always include Pro-Core. Sustainability and capacity development. The project acknowledges the important contribution of the short-term experts in helping the partner water utilities through capacity building. It also encouraged knowledge sharing among partner water utilities. As a result, the partner water utilities become capable and responsible duty bearers in managing the PROCOR program, including PROCOR projects and initiatives. They will also become capable mentors to other water utilities, sharing knowledge and experiences of reaching the most vulnerable. The PROCOR project has a direct impact on GAD and health promotion. The partner water utilities can fittingly portray their corporate role in society as it is participatory, sustainable, promotes human dignity, and the actualization of human potentials. The PROCOR project inspires the partner water utilities to engage in GAD plans that are PROCOR inclusive. Lastly, enabling environment. The PROCOR project is a witness to the fruits of successful cooperation among mandated institutions, individuals, and the partner water utilities under PUWAP through sustained access to water for the poor. So the values and experiences inspire PUWAP to spread its cause by continuously seeking cooperation and presenting PUWAP as a WOP model that fosters other water utilities towards growth and partakes well in the achievement of SDG 6. So now, what lies ahead? First, we work with the Pro-Core core goals further, assess whether these goals would be the same and be applicable as well to other water utilities. Second is to work further to fully institutionalize the Pro-Core in the water utilities. Third is to expand further cooperation with both the government or private institutions as PUAP becomes a countrywide project. Fourth is to align and support the National Economic and Development Authority to furnish the Philippine Water Supply and Sanitation Master Plan that guides water utilities towards achieving SDG 6. And lastly, support the four partner water utilities as mentors for capacity building and sharing of pro-core initiatives on access to water to other water utilities. That's all, Kevin. Thank you. So, back to Kevin.
Thank you, Mike. I was saying, and thank you for the pitch, and I think it's well understood in understanding how WOP is doing to reach out the vulnerable. And I'm requesting Gonzalo from Argentina to share with us his pitch.
Thank you, Kevin. I want to thank you on behalf of ISA for the invitation. Thank you, Julie, Class. Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Florencia. I want to share with you two anecdotes of my own life to help you to understand what is happening in Argentina and in Latin America itself. I am 21 years old nowadays, and when I was a child, I went to with my mother to Brazil by bus. I was 7 years old at that time, and this was the first time I saw a homeless living in the street in my life. I had to ask my mother why a man was living without any shelter in the street, without anything to eat. And my mother explained me what was happening with this man. At this time, 30 years ago, I we we didn't see any homeless in Argentina in the street. We had less than 5% of the population under the poverty line. We didn't have unemployment in Argentina and in the south cone of Latin America. We were the most equality society in the region. 30 years after that, we have almost 50% of the population under the poverty line. We have 20% of unemployment. And in the area of ISA, the utility I work for, we have more than 1,000 slums or informal settlements, all surrounding our headquarters. This is one of the things I want to remark in this session: inequality, the growth of poverty in our region. The other thing I want to explain you through an anecdote of my life. When I was a child, as I told you before, I was 7 years old, 8, 9 years old. The winters were so hard in Buenos Aires. My father, to start the engine of the car, should throw boiling water to the engine, to the car, to be able to go to school, to carry his children to the school. This last winter, I didn't wear a coat in 3 months. The weather is going hotter, warmer every year, and it is amazing. This is the second reason I think that vulnerable neighborhood, slums, or informal settlement needs to have a different approach. Climate change and inequality. And I think both have to be the guideline of our work regarding to this issue. If we want to overcome the challenges the slums present to us, we have to develop a special approach. And this is what we are doing here in Latin America and in Argentina itself. WOPs can help us doing which we most need at this moment, avoiding us or saving time, avoiding us to waste time, which is the thing that we don't have to spend. If we know the experience, if we can learn from the experience of other countries within our region, we can solve this problem faster. Colombia has a great experience in working in slums. Ecuador, Peru, Chile, Uruguay. Regarding to this issue, WOPs can be the great ally for the utilities in Latin America. I think that I will have more time within this session to explain more in detail our strategy in slums and in informal settlements. So I prefer to stop here and then to go deeper into this strategy, adding the experience we had with the London School of Economics as well. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Gonzalo, for the presentation and the in-depth and the understanding. May I take this opportunity to ask Faustina from Ghana to share with us her pitch. Faustina, are you getting me?
Hello, everybody. There's some noise in the background. Hello, everybody. It's great to be a part of this discussion that seeks to contribute to how WOPs contribute to services in low-income areas or vulnerable localities. I look forward to an interesting session that will contribute to this all-important issue. The water supply sector remains heavily subsidized around the world. A World Bank report, Doing More with Less, Smarter Subsidies for Water and Sanitation, reveals that subsidies total around 320 billion United States dollars a year globally. This excludes China and India. Even though these subsidies have the goal to ensure that water and sanitation services are affordable to the poor, they often end up benefiting the relatively well-to-do households already connected to networked services. An average of 56% of networked water supply subsidies reach the wealthiest quintiles of the population. A mere 6% reach the poorest quintiles. The case is even dire in Africa, where the richest 20% enjoy the lion's share of 74% subsidy, but only 7.4% goes to the poorest 50%. The rich benefit more from subsidies, regulated tariffs, as well as economies of scale, as they are mostly connected to networked services. This leaves low-income households without the support they need, further exacerbating existing inequalities. Despite many successful sectoral reforms in the 1990s, the Ghanaian urban water sector has not been able to keep up with the rapid increase in urban water demand. We have estimated that Ghana Water, directly or indirectly, covers between 62 to 77% of Ghana's 16.6 million urban residents through about 550,000 active connections. This means that many residents are only served indirectly, and this particularly affects low-income households where entire families are crowded in single rooms leased in compound houses. Whole slums usually lack basic water and sanitation services or have inadequate facilities. Therefore, most low-income households rely on tanker services, water vendors, other coping means, and also pay far higher prices for water, which significantly affects their economy and their quality of life. Only 30% of residents in vulnerable communities in Ghana water services. The lack of water in urban areas is a big issue which needs support from our work with the has provided the missing link through infrastructure improvements and capacity building. We have, through our WOPs, we have also had the opportunity and an obligation to discuss new approaches, set clear priorities for service expansions. Ultimately, the goal of every utility and family is to have access to a safe and reliable water supply within the house. Although for in-house water supply may be provided, the main feature is access to piped water supply inside the house. But due to low coverage, residents in LIUCs largely depend on secondary providers. Thanks to our partners, thousands of households that hitherto never thought of having private connections now have water in their premises, available when needed and free from contamination. Providing sustainable services to LIUCs is critical for meeting key public, social, and health objectives. water-related diseases tend to be common in low-income urban communities, and therefore, improving water services there will lead to reduction in water-related diseases, which means savings to individual households in terms of time and money, as well as a reduction in health bills. Beneficiary consumers in Ghana appreciate this targeted service, which is promoting the corporate image and goodwill of GWCL among the population. Through our WOPs, we have designed and are implementing effective subsidies, which has proven effective in delivering water services to households without access and unable to pay for first-time new service connection fee here in Ghana. And so improving water to poor communities is a win-win situation that utilities need to tap by partnering with experienced water operators. I believe that with this smart approach, poor residents are paying less for more water. JWCL is generating more revenue from the new customers in the low-income urban communities, and additional income is helping to improve citywide services. Certainly, this is a viable utility business. Beyond the support to achieve SDG 6, our work is also flavored with a coaching component. I still sit in my seat as the head of my department and enjoy immense support from our resident project manager, short-term experts, as well as other experts from Bay who have really influenced and helped to strengthen the technical and financial performance of my utility for greater impact. Thank you very much. Over for now.
Back to you, Kevin.
That's the right pronoun. Unmute. Okay. Thank you, Festina. Thank you, Roland. You got me?
Yes, thank you, Kevin. And thank you for inviting me to speak here. I'm talking from a bit more distance. I'm not working for a utility or a WOP directly, but I've got long-term experience working with poor communities. Yes?
Okay, it's your turn. Can you share with us?
Sorry, I started. Did you hear me or was I muted? Okay.
Oh, I'm hearing you. You're audible.
Yes, perfect. Thank you. I said I'm not working with a utility or a WOP, but I'm looking from a bit more distance. Among others, I'm on the board of Water for Life. And so I see all the projects that Water for Life is supporting with WOPs. And they've reached already 1.5 million people over the last years in 18 countries, all focused on poor communities. So my perspective, especially from that background, and I think the question is, are they reaching the vulnerable? What I've heard so far, I can say probably not in majority. Can they reach the most vulnerable? I think they do. And I've seen in many projects what is possible in terms of reaching the most vulnerable. And I'd like to just share some observations there. And one of them is poor vulnerable communities are like other communities. They want to have good, reliable service. So if you want to have customers that are happy and paying, it's important to know them, first of all. So have this kind of, I've heard about doing surveys. Already it was mentioned how important it is to engage the communities. And I think if you know them, there can be a trust and transparency that you can also adapt services towards them. And I've seen in many projects ways that have been found already to adapt services to communities. And of course, those communities are all very different. In one area, there'll be people who are very mobile, who come in and go out. In other areas, it's poor people who stay there. So I think when the services are not fixed as a one-fit-all service, but are really designed together to fit both the needs of the utility and the needs of the community, there is a bigger chance that it's successful. But if it's a one-fits-all and it's actually the service is designed for a rich community, then the chance that it is not fitting the needs of the poor community, of course, is very high. So this co-creation to work out the most appropriate kind of services would enhance the relationship and the ownership, but also make more appropriate services. And I think another one, I've lived in many countries where I've seen utilities as a customer operating. And what you notice is that the poor are just badly served. If there is shortage of water, the poor are the first to be disconnected. If there is a breakdown, the poor are the last one to be served. And of course, if you're badly served, you become a bad customer. So I think reliability and legitimacy of the utility is improved if the service is improved. Complaint services, customer services, customer satisfaction. And that's why I say I think poor customers are just like rich customers. They want to be served well, and they want to be served in a way that fits their needs and their abilities. And that adaptation, if that's possible, then the utilities can reach them. And to be honest, also from my own experience, what I've seen, actually, it's the most rich and biggest water consumers who are often the ones who don't pay the bill. So it's not the poor communities who are often the ones who don't pay their bills if they're well served. But it's often those who can afford to not pay a bill and get away with it who are the biggest ones not paying the bill. So the idea that poor people don't pay, I would put a question mark there if they're indeed well served. Then there's one elephant in the room often if you talk about poor areas, and that is land ownership. Of course, poor areas can be organized in many different ways. Some are illegal settlements, which makes it very difficult to invest because they're often not allowed to invest in there. So that is a legal issue, which is a problem. But also, many poor people are tenants. And so actually the house ownership is with someone else. You get this kind of issue that you want to serve them, but if you invest in household connections in the house, which is actually not owned by the poor people, you may actually push them out of the area. And the area may become a middle income area, and the poor people just move on to a worse area. So I think those legal issues, I found very often that there's not that much discussion about these issues. And it's really complex. I don't have an answer how to deal with it, but I do think it's crucial we pay attention to it before we invest, because sometimes you may need to ask property owners to invest in it or put in safeguards that means that poor people are not pushed out. And let me be clear, this is not something of a developing country situation. These are discussions we have in the Netherlands just the same way. And this is just a normal issue of land ownership and investment. And finally, I think it's a matter of political will. Who do you prioritize? And I think one of the big things that WOPs can do is there is a power imbalance. Poor people often don't have the opportunity to claim their rights for water the way rich communities can. And in WOPs, you wish this is organized in a more balanced power system locally, but WOPs can have a chance, be real, to actually help in balancing their power and giving voice to poor communities to actually raise their issues and put it on the table. Thanks a lot. Those are the points I wanted to make now in addition, and happy to discuss further.
Thank you, Rolene, for your presentation, and thank you all the panelists for the pitches. At this juncture, I want to ask a few questions to all the panelists, and the questions will be quite specific so that if I have a question to Festuna, I'll address this to Festuna. If I have a question to Rolene, it will be to Rolene, so that we are all engaged. The questions do not come in any particular order. I will ask a question to Rolene, the next will go to Mike, so they are not in any particular order. I hope we'll be able to pay attention and ensure that we are all up to date. I think that guides us, and that is fair enough. And maybe just to be fair now that Planet was the first to speak, I would want to ask Planet a question. In his presentation, he was very clear about the community needs, and I would ask, in his opinion, how can WOP support building the ownership within local community, ownership of this particular project within local communities?
Thank you, Kevin. As I said in the pitching earlier, we need to build the provisions of community engagement right in the designing of the WOPs. So what we have seen is there might be several ways that a WOP can support building ownership within local communities in different innovative ways and models. So I will talk about some of these models that have been kind of tested in different parts of the world. Um, One is to use intermediaries agents such as NGOs or community-based organizations or water users association, etc. So utility use intermediaries to connect with the vulnerable populations or low-income settlements with the intermediaries. So various utilities have engaged in partnership with NGOs to reach out the low-income community and work with them to generate citizens' voice and facilitate community feedback. These were designed to improve planning and coordination mechanism and to help communities access pro-poor services. So NGOs engage with communities to understand gaps in the system and use that information to influence the utilities planning processes. So mapping service level in Uganda and Malawi, for example, also helped NGOs present real-time maps of water access points, highlighting the levels of inequities, which many speakers talked about, of service provision to inform planning. NGOs also provided knowledge and training to CBOs, that means community-based organizations and water users association as utility agents to build up their skill, capacity and knowledge about water and water safety and the skills required for process of securing and managing water connections. With this knowledge, CBOs and water users associations enable senior utility managers to have insight into the issues that matter to the poor and marginalized market group. The second model is direct customer feedback mechanisms. So some utilities have developed customer charters or ethos and put mechanisms in place for good customer service, including situating officers or a low income customer support unit in an informal settlement to ensure that people have access to the services easily. A toll free helpline for logging complaints, for example, was introduced in Kampala, Uganda earlier. However, in Bangladesh, when we see community leaders and individual customers still have to visit the utility head office to engage directly with pro-poor units. So there are different sort of experiences around that. In Zambia, the independent water regulator like Navasco established water watch groups to involve customers in monitoring services and help improve its presence on the ground. The service provider has to name a senior employee as a contract person who is authorized to deal with all issues brought forward by respective water watch group and display contact details of water watch groups in all pay stations and offices to which customers have access to. So this model has also been kind of used to build the ownership of the local communities. The third is proactive efforts from the utility about public outreach and engagement programs. The utility also reach out to communities in informal settlements to inform about utility and water related developments and to respond to customers' questions through public forums. This could be through participation through live radio program, etc., organized by NGOs or where utility or regulatory teams organize consumer sensitization events and so on. So I think then there are media campaigns and other methods also. In Kenya, the utility used forums such as public meetings, focus group discussions, etc., landlord meetings, workshop and training to help the community to get some useful feedback. So I think this is, and lastly, what we see as a model is a delegated management model. So in the delegated management model, we have seen an example in Kenya where the case of Nyalenda, the largest slum of Kusma in Kenya, where utility partner with small scale providers, and they are becoming increasingly important as utilities struggle to serve a growing population and the poor. So a delegated management approach as one type of partnership in which master operators purchase bulk water supplies and then responsible for collecting the water payments from their customer. So in this case we have seen that it helped the utility quickly to reduce its unaccounted for water using this approach, as both the master operators as well the utility share an interest in preventing illegal connections from the water supply scheme. So I would say that there is not a one way of building up the ownership of the community as such, as we have seen that different models and approaches have been used in different countries based on the local context, etc. But at the same time, I also say that it is very very important to engage with this proactively right in the beginning of the designing of the WOP, so that it does not come to reach the unserved as an afterthought after you have started your WOP, focusing on other major management and engineering aspects of the water supply. So I will just stop here and say that, yeah, as I said in my pitching earlier, that we have to proactively engage right at the designing of the WOP and ensure that there is a space in a WOP to deal with this issue comprehensively and collectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Planet. And thank you. Just picking up from where Planet has asked, Festuna, and from Festuna's presentation, we also had a strong water users association as a group for helping in ensuring pipe water reach the low-income consumers. So how does this work in Ghana, and how is the local ownership within the communities ensured in this situation, in such a situation in Ghana? Festuna, are you together?
Thank you, Kevin. In almost all the low-income communities we work in, they all lack good water infrastructure, and as such, members of the community are dependent on more expensive or inferior alternatives for their water supply. So the communities that we work in already have positive attitudes towards our water interventions. This helps us to create a strong partnership with the community, which is often facilitated by community leaders. We have a community engagement protocol that we follow when we enter a community. We first engage the local assembly, which we call the municipal assemblies in Ghana. And from there, we engage the traditional leadership of the community before we even engage the unit committees or the local level leader at the community. And so when we also engage landlords association, because in most of the communities that we work in, there's a large proportion of people who rent their housing. Usually 75% of people in these communities rent their homes. And so we have lots of landlord associations in these places. And we also work through the landlord associations who play an important role in the implementation and assuring the ownership of the local community who already have a vested interest in the services to be sustainable. And these associations also add us to their platforms. So we are informed about what happens in the community. Actually, our community, we also undertake a lot of community engagement activities. We hold lots of meetings, forums, debates, visits to individual homes. And most of these activities usually lead to our setting up water user associations, which become the key interface between JWCL and the community. And we have been able to establish about 25 water user associations. We established about 14 in the last 3 years. And just within the past 2 weeks, we have added another 9. So we interface strongly with the communities, we engage with them. So even if our project ends, the water user associations are there to provide that key link in communication and making sure that our project continues to prolong within these areas and that bills are paid, non-revenue water issues like illegal connections are reported to the utility for us to deal with it. And so we have all these strong bodies at the community level that are supporting us in our work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Festina, and thank you for sharing the Ghanaian experience. Maybe now move and ask and make a question now that he is working with different utilities, which definitely will have different models to reach the vulnerables in their respective service areas. Maybe you can explain to us how these different utilities provide services to the vulnerable. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Kevin. So, yeah, basically the target of the ProCore project is to reach the most vulnerable. And then there are many considerations. One is 4 water utilities are not category A or the big water utilities in the Philippines, but also we consider that reaching the most vulnerable, there's actually a risk because of the cost of for investment, which may not be favorable for the water utilities. But because of these reasons and others, so the strategies were planned carefully and objectively. The ProCore projects were thought of this way. And then we always consider affordability for the beneficiaries to pay for the monthly bill. And also we consider the existing programs of the local and the national government along with the other stakeholders. So for example, just to give 2 examples are in Bayawan for the Bayawan Water District. So the income of some of the beneficiaries are actually just seasonal because they're into agriculture. So the Bayawan Water District devised a way wherein the beneficiaries engaged in what do you call that, water and livelihood program. So it is actually a promotion of backyard farming. For backyard farming, they were able to have produce to sell and earn an income. And at the same time, they were given incentives. From there, they were able to, what do you call that? They were able to pay the monthly bill for water. So that is one initiative that was done by Bawad. And then the other one is, another is from the local government of Toledo. So the local government has a poverty reduction program. In their program, the monthly bill for the minimum consumption is subsidized for all people who lives in Toledo. So it is a good news because especially for those who cannot afford to pay the monthly bill. So in our end here at QWOP and also for the water visit of Toledo City, so we were more focused now on the connection fee, which is something they cannot afford, and also to extend the pipes to the poor areas so they can have water. So actually, there are many ways or strategies to do it, but it varies even for the 4 water utilities where the 4 cities are also located. So we make sure that we are very objective. We consider all the things, the stakeholders, the programs from the government, and other strategies that we can think so that we can provide water for the most vulnerable. So at the same time, we also make sure that the project or the ProCore project is sustainable. So one of the things that we have done is to capacity building of the personnel, and then at the same time is to institutionalize the ProCore program. And then we also were able to furnish the business plan for the water utility so that it will help them, guide them whenever they do some planning for investments for the poor. So whenever the project is done, everything is complete, they are capable as duty bearers in managing and handling the pro-poor activities. So that is what I can share for this part. Kevin?
Uh, thank you, Mike. And maybe just to pick up from where you left, WOPs actually help in extending water services to the low-income areas, and the focus has been to ensure more households are connected. It reaches the households. So the question is, are these low households able to pay for their water bills as well, and are they benefiting from this and user connections?
Yes, that is, as I've said in my sharing, that we make sure that it's not just about giving them water and that's it. It's basically, of course, part is the obligation to pay water that is affordable for them. So that, as I've shared a while ago, through Bawad and Toledo, and then at the same time, we also have an affordability matrix. We study on that before we, of course, part of the sustainability requirement is the financial. So as I shared a while ago, we make sure that the beneficiaries can pay the bill monthly without being disconnected.
Thank you, Mike. Christina, I have a question that really interests me, and that is basically trying to understand the role of WOPs in supporting service to the low-income areas. These extensions, these end-user connections, what key role does WOP play in this?
Is that question for me, Kevin?
No, it's for Festuna from Ghana.
There's a lot of noise, so I couldn't really hear. And if you could also speak up, please.
Okay, Christina, you look at all the approaches and the key things that WOF is doing, or rather that we are doing towards ensuring the low-income consumers get services. The utilities are doing this revenue mobilization, monitoring, but I'm asking, what is the key role that is played by WOP in all this?
Okay, that's a very good question. As a matter of fact, water partnership was instrumental in establishing what is now an independent low-income customer support department, advocating for inclusive services in urban Ghana. Like many other water utilities in the world, also within Ghana Water, engineers have a strong influence on day-to-day operations, and they often see water services as a technical challenge and take less note of the social aspects of providing water, especially to the marginalized and deprived areas where populations are dense and we have unplanned layouts, and they usually see it as a challenge. So it was the water operators, the TENS and EVDs then that required that the social aspect of water supply was included in their water intervention projects. And also now water operators are essential in making sure that funding is allocated to address social aspects of water intervention. So yes, water operators, especially from the north, are playing key roles in ensuring equality in water service delivery in the south. Thank you. Over.
Thank you, Christina. And now may I look at Rolian. I hope I'm pronouncing that name right. Rolian.
Rolin, but it's fine.
Rolin. Okay, Rolin. Okay. You look at all that Christina has explained about WOPs, and we know one of the key challenges and issues is of service to the low-income areas is acquisition of maybe land whales. And so does WOP has any role to play in these internal operations, maybe of a partner, of a mentor-mentee company?
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Well, I think Festina already, she explained it very well, and there's nothing I could add to that. That indeed the WOPs can help to advocate for certain priorities that are often not automatically in the, or traditionally not in the utility. And once you have advocated for that and you have proven that there are really ways to reach vulnerable communities in a way that is even viable for the utility, once that is clear and that experience is there, you can also further make sure it's institutionalized, it's funded. So with regards to the land ownership, as she also said, there's in her community, 75% of the properties are actually owned by landowners and not by the people who live there. That's an important dynamic because if, for instance, through a WOP, you would install, or if you're going to install household connections, you actually increase the value of the properties of these landowners. And then you need to have a very good triangular discussion between the landowner, the tenant, and the investor, how you deal with that, because otherwise it's just a present for landowners. So you need to have safeguards for the community. And I understand they have this in Ghana, and that's really interesting to see how they do that, to make sure there are safeguards and there are agreements on how you can make sure that actually the poor community is the beneficiary and not the landowner. But you could also think of to what extent is the landowner going to invest themselves? Because are others investing? Is there public money or donor money invested in their property, or are they required to invest themselves and maybe facilitate through credit schemes or something to make them able to invest in their own property? So there's a wide way. I don't have one way how you should deal with it because it depends very much on the local situation and the legal context. But I think what WOPs can do is help with the design. And as was mentioned before, the WOPs can make sure that there's specific attention for this, and that there's design for this, and that there's transparency also in this, in what choices are being made, and that this is transparent also to the community. But often in WOPs, because there is a donor involved, there's also often a requirement of transparency to the donor. But I think it's especially important that this transparency to the community, who is investing, who is benefiting, and what is the community role in this. I think that's enough. Thanks.
Thank you, Rosalind. Just before you pause, maybe I can ask a further question. And having worked with an organization that is very key in funding projects focusing on the poor, and which is part of the work, and in your own assessment, do you feel you're actually making a serious impact?
Yes, well, at this moment, I'm on the board for Water for Life, and Water for Life is fully focused on funding facilities for the poor through water operators in countries, their partners. And I think they've made a big impact already, especially because it has this focus. So the projects are entirely designed for this. Of course, it's a learning path together with your partner. It's not that, so in the partnership, you have to find out these ways together. But for instance, Ghana is one of the key partners in this. And I think there's a lot that has been made possible. And as I said, there's already 1.5 million people that we have reached through these services. And in evaluations, we saw that that a lot of these services are sustainable for people. But I think it's a process of working together that you learn and you develop better strategies over time. So I have hope that we can become stronger all together in really reaching them in a sustainable way. Does that answer your question, Kev?
Yes, it does. Thank you. It does. Maybe Gonzalo, from your earlier presentation, we noted that your utility has a lot of experience working with learning institutions like University of London. And if I just put it to you, do you feel that the institutions give a clear focus and enough attention is given towards service provision to the low-income consumers or low-income dwellers, be it from the government perspective, the donors, the academia, these agencies, and even the regulatory bodies?
Thank you very much, Kevin. Well, as I told you before, the period of transformation of our economic and social situation was so fast that we had not enough time to readapt the way the water organization works. So attending to this issue, to this challenge, last year we started a process of changing among ISA, our utility, that I think it is remarkable that is the second largest water utility in the region and the fifth in the world regarding to the population. We deliver drinking water and wastewater services. We have more than 15 million people inside our area. So this process began with the proposal of changing the regulatory framework that doesn't allow us to enter the informal settlement. As I mentioned before, we have more than 1,000 neighborhood of its kind in our area, and we had no experience working inside. This is one of the decisions our board of directors took last year. And the second one was started to work with universities, nationals and international. In the second case, I want to highlight the experience we carried out with the London School of Economics. They offer to ISA carrying out a consultancy project led by four master degree students that are present in this session. I want to introduce them after this explanation. This was a very insightful experience because it was the first time that we developed a methodology to evaluate the impact of what we do in informal settlement and slums. What they did was take four dimensions: gender, social, economic, and environment, and they develop metrics to help us be able to understand what is the impact of our work in the field, how we can change the quality of life of the people who lives in such a poor neighborhoods. After this work, we started developing a methodology among the whole company, the whole management. Nowadays we have 7,000 employees that are aware of what is happening in slums, so they can see the importance of their work in the field. So this is one of the big changes we introduced last year. The other one was to ask a national university to planning the expansion of the services in this neighborhood. In Argentina, we have national universities, public ones, that must help governments and public companies and ISA to reach the poor population. So we started work together with them. Nowadays we are getting the new master plans to enter this neighborhood. With this plan, we are going to improve the quality of life of more than 2 million people in the next 3 years. And also, we are strengthening the other big program that we have in ISA, which is called Agua más Trabajo, Water plus Work. That is a kind of planification that hires people that live itself in the slums. So we work together with them, avoiding to have to deal with the resistance of the people. As you know, people are jealous about what happened in their own neighborhood. So we have with them together, building confidence. It is easier to deliver water and wastewater treatment to them. I think that to warn organization about what is happening in this kind of neighborhood, we have to explain first of all that inequality is the reason, is the cause of this phenomenon. If we don't improve the economic situation or the social situation nationwide, it would be impossible to overcome the challenges this kind of slums present to us. So of course we have to work with economic ministry, with shelter secretary and other governments and regulatory agencies. Alone we can do anything. This is clear. So well, I don't know if you, Kevin, want to go further. You need further information about this topic. So please tell me.
No, you are clear, and I think the point is home. The point is quite well put and understood. Thank you, and thank you. And maybe I'll ask Kumar, is it as somebody who has experience working with WOPs that which are also partnering with WaterAid, in his opinion, and do the utilities have the right skills or capacity or knowledge to handle these service delivery models?
Thank you, Kevin, for the question. And I could see someone mentioned about the role of regulation in supporting the provisions as well in the comments box. So, in our experience, water utilities and both mentor and mentee um, often may not have either the appropriate positioning or the skills, capacity, or knowledge to support the models to reach out the vulnerable populations. And when I say positioning, uh, it means it's not only a question of capacity alone, but it's also a question of space that under which they operate, under the regulation and the policy making functions of the sector. So therefore what we feel that WOP models based on the experience of our engaged WOPs as well as the some other organizations who used these models worldwide. So what we see is that the WOP models which involve local NGOs or community based organizations as additional partner to reach effectively to the vulnerable population, uh, help bridging this gap of capacity, skills, or maybe the, as I said, the positioning of the utility as well. um, so it also helps in ensuring the WOPs have adequate provisioning and handholding support to design and implement a model that is demand driven and have a larger chances of being successful in the long run. So this is the major difference we feel between the conventional mentor mentee utility partnership model as well as model where additional partners are also there in shape of the NGOs with the commitment to provide access to safe water, sanitation, and hygiene to low-income settlements. So I think there has been, and I would like to talk about a couple of examples here to validate this point. Was that in low income customer support units in Dhaka in Bangladesh, we had local NGO, the Sastya Kendra, which triggered one of the earlier pro-poor utility processes when it agreed to guarantee to communities bill payments for a piped water network extension into slum areas. So the utility, seeing the demonstrated willingness of the poor people to pay for a reliable service, set about developing a low-income customer support unit, which outsources water supply service to coordination to CBOs in slums across the city. That is one. The second is when in Malawi, Lengwe, we had no the water supply service challenge was extensive non-payment concern from a mismanaged water kiosk supply system, which was obviously intervention, pro-poor intervention to supply water. Uh, so there was a concern from a mismanaged water kiosk supply system that threatened to wide-scale disconnections and led the utility to work with other stakeholders to establish and outsource the management of a system of water kiosk to water user associations under the kiosk management unit based on in Longway Water Board. So when WaterAid supported, WOPs entered into this area in Thames Loves Malawi project, we found that due to the long community engagement of WaterAid around that issues and its partners, the community participation, or we are talking about the ownership in this project, was to the extent that communities provided free labor to support the installation of otherwise unaffordable lengthy transfer main that was about 5 kilometers of length, and then water was then provided to via water kiosk and managed by the establishment of a water user committee. So this is another great example of the community participation due to the engagement of a local NGO or a significantly in that kind of a thing. And if we look at beyond the water aid experiences, I would see that the country from where I am positioned as of now in India, we can also see that even the government um, is trying to build in the role for the CBOs to reach the slums and the populations. In Odisha, we have a project called Drink from Tap Mission in the state, where in the urban local bodies, and Odisha has a significantly high large slum population in Indian states. And the government there has decided to engage women self-help groups, which were created to empower women in terms of as a connection between the government-owned utility, which is WATCO, which is managing the project, and the interface with the slum communities in terms of uh, you know bringing awareness to the people about the safety of the water they are drinking, and also paying for that, billing, collection, etc., etc. And that is at a very high scale, I mean to say. So in terms of the incentives that women SHGs are getting, in the way they have got a very meaningful role as a intermediary between the utility, a state utility, which is the WATCO in Odisha, and the youth slum population in many towns of Odisha. So I think that is another where government has adopted this approach to upscale. They realize that they cannot do it alone. They cannot reach this service alone with them. So I think that is another typical example where we have been in discussion, but we are not a direct partner to this project. But it's amazing to see. I mean to say the scale and the impact of this kind of a project. So I would say that definitely when we in terms of your question about capacity and skills, obviously diversifying the partnership with involvement of NGOs, local NGOs, CBOs with good understanding of and facilitation capabilities to bring the demand at the forefront and to educate the communities in terms of management of the water supply schemes and playing some meaningful role, mandated role from there, is something which I think has a better chances of success in reaching to the vulnerable population. So I would just stop here, and yeah, I think that is all from my side on the skills capacity. So of the utilities in terms of reaching out to the vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kumar. And maybe just still picking up on the capacity and the capacity gaps you've identified. Mike, we believe the capacity gaps earlier shared could be actually be built through WOPs.
Okay, so I would like to share much about this one because about capacity. In the beginning, the utilities have the potentials and the right attitude to complement the given skills and knowledge as to start with. So that is something we notice, and then there is that eagerness to learn, and through WOP, these skills and knowledge were promoted further. So that was the good news when we are experienced with the water utilities, because they have that, aside from the given skills and knowledge, they have that eagerness and that attitude to learn. And then that's actually another key ingredient, which is even soft, not even something you can just pick up from anywhere. And then it's something that actually the short-term experts, when they are very one of their comments, especially when they do trainings. And then from there, the capacity development or trainings were not that difficult anymore because of that attitude and that eagerness. And then from that capacity development provided, it also helped the water utilities to become capable and responsible duty bearers in managing the proper activities. Actually, there is still many things to be done for this part, but what is the good news about that is that we are progressing well. And then also the water utilities know for the fact that to partake in the achievement of the SDG 6, the most vulnerable should be connected. So it's not just about we know already about this and then we are capacitated, but we are also responsible for those who are not yet connected. So the direction of our project basically is actually our project manager focus also on the business plan as I've shared, because from there we will be able to do some concrete plans for the poor, not just short term but long term as well. So here, the risks by the water utilities to provide access to water for the poor because of investment issues. So for the business plan and then investment plans and then the through MIS, we are able to see things and then we can, that it is actually possible to connect the most vulnerable, plus other factors as well. Aside from the capacity building, there are also other areas, as I've shared, like the stakeholders, the other stakeholders, and the laws and regulations in the government and even local that would also help usher and be able to help in the to let this the most vulnerable be connected to water.
Thank you, and thank you very much, Mike, for that. And maybe just still picking up on the capacity and building the capacities to ensure that then the very vulnerable are able to access water. Festuna, what was the role of WOPs for this support in Ghana Water? And is there any lesson you would want to share with other utilities on how this all started, the WOP support?
Thank you, Kevin. Water operators like Waterworks and Water for Life have helped Ghana Water tremendously. Unfortunately, up till today, many of my colleagues have the perception that low-income customers are poorly paying customers. But our operators don't see it that way, and therefore provide us with a much needed backing, allowing our department to undertake new water expansion projects in the low-income urban communities. But slowly but surely, the perspectives of my colleagues are changing, and we're getting more cooperation from them. We are also really blessed in Ghana with strong support from our top management. The trigger for other utilities to start a WOP is to express their intent to partner with an experienced utility, and that means the utility must be willing to comply with the conditions that underlie the partnership so as to enjoy the opportunities that come with it. You know, the WOP support is rooted on a culture of solidarity, which requires strong commitments from the managing director as well as other top senior managers who dedicate time and effort to ensure that results are achieved under the WOP. Thank you. Over.
Thank you very much, Festina. And maybe before I give you a break, what really informs the kind of model to use to serve the low-income areas in Ghana? When you decide to use a public point, a water kiosk, what really informs this in Ghana?
Sorry, I was muted. You know, in Ghana, we are guided by the National Water Policy that favors private connections. So as much as possible, we try to include the promotion of private connections in our water interventions. In doing so, we always look at the local contents, and often you find that there are several properties that can be better served by yard connections. But then if we discover that despite our water demand promotions, there are still areas within the community that are not properly covered by private house connections, or it's not technically feasible to connect privately, then we opt for communal standpipes. In doing so, we have to assure ourselves that the standpipe vendor who signs an agreement with Ghana Water will be able to sell enough water to make it a viable business for the vendor within the community. Thank you. Over.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much all the panelists for your responses to the question and your participation and sharing in of your insights and experiences in different utilities just to ensure service to the very low income communities enhanced. I think at this juncture, I would love to hand over the program to Every, I believe that is the name, from WOP.
Hi, thanks, Kevin. I think it's to me, Julie from GWAPA, who will take it over. Thank you so much for your great questions, Kevin, and to all the speakers for their replies. I found that really interesting, and I'm just going to take it from there and ask a couple of questions that are, that are open for all of you to reply to. I'd like to focus in a little bit more on like WOPs specifically, and WOPs as these partners between peer utilities, first and foremost. So part of the official definition of WOPs is that they should support water and sanitation operators in delivering a better service to more people, and especially the poor. So like this SDG 6 goal is really central to its raison d'etre. But at the same time, we see that this is rarely the focus. Currently, around 20% of WOPs have a pro-poor consideration or pro-poor focused in some way. There's more of a natural tendency for utilities to come together around more sort of technical and financial sort of considerations. And since we want WOPs, often, it's also an important thing that they are demand oriented, that they come from, the desires of of the utility that's benefiting the most from the partnership. Wondering, how do you think that this demand for that kind of focus can be built? Should it be like a required component of all WOPs, as Puneet has been suggesting, or is there a role of regulators? What are your thoughts on this? Please just put up your hand if you have an interest in replying to that one. I'm sure that Rolin would like to speak. Excellent, just in time.
Yeah, I think, as you say, because only 20% apparently now has this focus on poor, apparently there is something that needs to be done about it. Because the WOPs do exist because of SDG 6 to reach it. And I think utilities on both sides often have a very technical and business-oriented focus, and originally not so much a specific poor-oriented focus. I mean, that is the same, I assume, for the utilities on both sides of the WOP. So I think additional effort is needed, and therefore, you could put that in putting in a requirement until it is institutionalized, until this is a normal part of it. But if it is not coming automatically, I think we need to strengthen that pressure a bit more. And I think, as we can hear here, there is plenty of knowledge around how you can do it. So it's also about unlocking that knowledge and giving it space within the WOPs.
Thanks, really very valuable. Any other replies to that question? Gonzalo, please.
Well, at ISA, we have the honor to manage the WOPLAC, the Latin American part of the program. So we can see directly the results of the cooperation between partners within the region. And I want to highlight that in Latin America, some countries have a lot of experience working in improving the approach to slums. One of them is Colombia, for instance, the Medellin model, the model developed by the Medellin city, is well known, is famous about the good results they achieve. For instance, one of the changes they introduced was to build a mix between middle class neighborhood or households with poor. I think it can be a good idea to develop within the WOPs a kind of ranking of or identify the cities that are famous or well known due to one aspect of the approach to slums. Medellin is one of them, Sao Paulo can be another one. Buenos Aires itself has a good experience in building infrastructure in neighborhoods as the Villa 31, for instance. So I think the WOPs are a good tool to improve the performance of water utilities in such a field. Thank you, Julie.
Okay, thanks very much. And yeah, Faustina, please go ahead. Faustina, we cannot hear you yet. Faustina, can you go ahead?
Oh, okay, thank you, thank you. I didn't know you were calling me. For me, we appreciate the institutional and financial support that brings to our utility. But the WOP support in Ghana Water was instrumental in putting special attention to low-income urban communities on our company's top management agenda. It is through our WOPs that this agenda even got to our board of directors. So top management buy-in is the starting point because management bought into this philosophy. Now we have developed models that we are using to serve the low-income urban communities. So top management buy-in is the starting point for WOPs in utilities. Thank you. Over.
Thanks a lot, Faustina. That's, I mean, such an interesting point, really, how valuable the WOP was for giving, credibility and weight to this unit within Ghana Water, and recognizing its importance. And I think that this is really an important takeaway, is how WOPs can bring attention to these kinds of issues that might not have been priority in the first place. I have another, some people would say that, a utility in the north, I mean, what does it know about vulnerable in an informal settlement in a country in Africa? Do they even have the capacity and the knowledge or the skills to meaningfully contribute to this question and concern? What do you think about that? How true is that? And if it is true, and probably it is to some extent, how can this maybe be mitigated? What are some suggestions around this? Who would like to reply to that one? Great, Faustina, over to you.
Thank you. When our unit then, about 6 years ago, was established, we had to work with NGOs to deliver the software aspects of our programs. That is the community engagement sensitization programs. When we do WASH in schools, we depend on an NGO to do the school health education program. But over the years, we have learned from the NGOs. We have built our own capacities to deliver these services ourselves as utility staff. But then I think that it is instrumental to involve CSOs, NGOs, local-based organizations. I think I mentioned before, even for us, we undertake baseline studies before we enter any community. And one of the criteria we look out for is to look for other organizations that are also operating within that particular community, so we can work with them, we can collaborate with them. So yes, in LI's work, it is a collective effort. The utility cannot do it by themselves. So if there are NGOs, there are CSOs, there are local bodies that you can work with, it is important to work with all of them. And for us, it is in our protocols to work with all these bodies in any intervention that we deliver. Thank you. Over.
Faustina, thanks a lot. But before we let you go there, I want to also comment on the fact that Ghana Water is itself involved in WOPs with other partners in Africa. What value do you think that has? I mean, what is it? Do you think there's any kind of added value in having a sort of a South-South relationship in a WOP?
Oh, yes. Like myself, my partners also feel the moral duty to help the vulnerable. But it is our conviction that in addition to it being the most rewarding activity of a WOP, it is also the area where I believe there are lots of opportunities. As I have addressed in my presentation, it is not only that it is not only about water services and giving subsidies, but it is equally important.
Thanks. Is there anyone else who'd like to take up this question, this statement about northern operators not having the knowledge and skills to contribute to WOPs that focus on vulnerable communities? Punit, Rolin, please go ahead, Rolin. Rolin, I'm not hearing you.
Sorry, I was not unmuted. Typical. I think the value has often, as I hear here already, also from the other speakers, is not only in. No, it's not about bringing skills from one to the other, but it's much more about creating space for a dialogue, how you serve different communities, how you improve services in the organization. I think and I'm really happy to hear that Ghana Water is also involved in WOPs with other countries, because that was exactly the question I actually wanted to ask. Do we already have these kind of WOPs? Why would it only be northern to southern? But I think it's about giving space for this discussion. How do you improve services, and how do you improve? And it's often good if there's an external partner sitting with you, looking at how do you improve your services, asking questions and raising a discussion. So I don't see it as much as bringing a skill from one to the other. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, valuable point. Thanks a lot. Any other responses to that one? Faustina, you've got your hand up again. You have a lot to say on this one.
Thank you. I want to add that, the challenges that we face here in Ghana cannot be compared to those in the Netherlands. But for me, it has been very educational to be introduced to and exposed to different work practices and views under the WOP. I am always looking at the social challenges, but my northern work partners sometimes wish to quantify the expansion of service in financial terms. And they are always looking at margins and cost per connection, payback periods, and all of that, which brings an interesting perspective into our discussions and the work that we are doing. And it also helps me to learn more. As I learn from them, they are also learning from the different conditions that we have here in Ghana.
That's great and important. That this is very much a two-way street. I'm gonna, without having other responses on that particular question, let me move on to sort of a final one from my side, which is, and I'd really love it if every one of the panelists could answer this one. I think if you're making recommendations to a potential WOP parties about reaching the most vulnerable, what recommendations would you make? What should they do and what should they not do in terms of what focus, types of partners, who needs to be involved, what should it avoid doing, what kind of time frame should we be looking at, some of these kinds of questions. It would be great if everyone could reply to that one. Maybe I could ask Mike to start.
Thanks. Yes, first of all, I just like to say I'm very appreciative of the help that's been given to us by the short-term experts and to the law. Yeah, actually, in my cross-border projects, when I go for the sustainability requirements, that's when I actually discovered that there are things that these water utility do need some assistance from the so that's actually I share with the project manager, and that we need some short-term experts, for example, for water availability, and then at the same time on financial, because these water utilities are not big water utilities, so their funding is limited and like that. So how to reach the vulnerable it's very important that financially they are also very what do you call that? They have the capacity also to plan and to do right investments. So I share that to our project manager Carl, and then I'm very happy that the project manager has been very responsive, and he's very happy also that I share those things, and I'm very happy that the short-term expert actually visited the Philippines to visit the 4 water utilities where assistance is needed so that sustainability requirements for the proper projects can be done. So that's basically actually what I can really share about this part.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. That's really super important. Puneet, what are your replies? Puneet, are you there? The question, what do you recommend? What to do, what you should do, and what you should not do, in a few words, for someone new engaging on WOPs who wants to reach the most vulnerable? Puneet, did you hear me? Oh, I'm sorry. That question was for Puneet. My question was, Puneet, are you with us? Can you hear us?
Yes, Julie, now I can hear you. I missed you a couple of sentences. Yeah.
My apologies. I must have been muted. Sorry. So my question, yeah, if you could also respond to this question, what are the do's and don'ts for WOP practitioners in reaching the most vulnerable? Just one of each, please.
Yeah, I think the key point that I mentioned earlier was if we have to reach vulnerable, the identification of demand and putting it on the main agenda of the WOP is something which is very critical step in overall designing of WOPs. And I think for that, we really need to have a robust need assessment studies, including some scanning of the policy and regulatory environments under which the utility operates, and the social issues that might be present in the area before we jump on the designing of the WOPs. So I think that is we should must do, as I say. What we should not do, I think, I think that for SDG 6, if we really want to be there in time, or at least close to that, we really need to think about the ways of how we can make it as a one of the non-negotiable focus areas within the WOPs that we look at, either it is north south or south south, depending upon the experience that we want to bring in. I think that is something which will remain very very critical, because I think the progress so far has I mean, the people have thought about it, tried to test out different models and upscaling it. But having said that, I think much more action and speedier kind of a ways of working would be required to bridge this gap which we are lagging behind significantly, especially reaching the poor and vulnerable, as the challenge is also growing as we continue to work on this issue in many cities and towns in a rapidly urbanizing world. So I think that is where I will close in terms of my suggestions on do's and don'ts. Julie, thank you.
That's really great. And I'd like to highlight also that we have a community of practice specifically focused on this question of the inclusiveness and reaching the most vulnerable in WOPs. So it's something that we can follow up in talking about together. Just quickly I'm seeing that there are also some very interesting questions in the chat that I had overlooked that I could share from the audience. Is there anyone else who has some quick do's and don'ts before I move over? Faustina, would you like to reply to one of the questions that's in the chat? No, you just go ahead.
Unfortunately, I have not gone to the chat, but I also wanted to say a word on the do's and the don'ts. You know, my experiential knowledge shows that the approach to sustainable service delivery requires dynamism and continuous innovation in strategy that targets the varied needs of low-income urban communities. So it is important for communities to stop working in isolation, but rather come together, pull human, financial, technical resources together to be able to scale up and reach more people who are still unserved or underserved. Thank you. Over. So I'll go to the chat and look at some of the questions now.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, and Gonzalo.
Thank you, Julie. Well, it's amazing what is happening in Argentina regarding to delivering drinking water in slums. Once we get with the pipeline, once we could go into the slums and people can get water from the network. Too much people doesn't want to take this water because it's not free for free. If they take water from wells, they should not pay a bill monthly. So you can understand that once you can get with drinking water to a neighbor, you must teach him or teach her how their life is going to be improved by this water of high quality. So the next step of our work can be teach the population about the impact that drinking water can have, not only in health, but in economic, in gender, in social issues. So I encourage you and the WOPs to work harder regarding to measure the impact of water. This was the aim of the work we carry out with the London School of Economics, but I think we have too much to do regarding to this topic. Teach the population. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Gonzalo. And yeah, surely WOPs can be a support in building that kind of capacity to engage with community and look at those sustainable service delivery models. Finally, Rolling, just to have everybody give an opportunity to give their do's and don'ts, over to you quickly. And then, sorry for taking a few extra minutes. We got a bit of a late start, so hopefully we can take a few extra minutes and reply to those questions that are in the chat. Rolling, over to you, please.
Thank you. Well, very quickly then, I think 2 points. One is never assume, always check. So when you give those people you want to target a platform that they can actually influence and say how it would work for them. But the same within the WOP, also in the partnership towards each other, give each other a platform to discuss how things work and to exchange. The other one is make sure that addressing giving water for poor people is at the core of the WOP and not an add-on. I think too often it's still that there is a core business of the WOP and then there is a pro-poor addition. And I think that the pro-poor should be integrated, it should be at the core of service delivery to fulfill this right to water for people. Thanks.
Fantastic. Yeah, thanks very much. So just very briefly before I hand this over again to WaterAid, to Hannah to do a wrap up for us. So a couple questions that have appeared in the chat. How have the different utilities incorporated communities in the process of water provision? in your experience, has it been helpful? And what are some of the challenges you have faced? This is a great question, a big question. Some of the panelists have already tried to answer this question, but maybe there's someone who has a quick response to that. And if not, if there are any second people who would like to add to this, they can do so in further debate beyond this session. But I'll take Gonzalo, who's the first to raise his hand. Please, over to you, Gonzalo.
Thank you. We hire people from the slums. We work with them. We pay a salary to them. This is the best way to work with neighbors in this kind of slums for us, in our opinion.
Fantastic. Great. Question answered. Next question. How do the utilities ensure quality control, that is reliability of drinking water, quality, etc., of the services that are provided by those CBOs or other small-scale providers? So going to what you're talking about, Gonzalo, also particularly, I think, addressed at Ghana Water.
Is it my turn?
No, I think that one is specifically addressed to Christina.
Thank you. I mentioned that we have a comprehensive community engagement program where we educate and sensitize residents about our initiatives, and we continue to support them to connect potable water into their homes. And these residents also participate effectively through forums, debates, visits. We also have established WhatsApp platforms in all the communities that we work in. And JWCL is also visible, very visible in these communities. Our low-income customer support officers work with them when there are issues with pipe supplies. They immediately put information on the platforms. Sometimes they take pictures of issues that are going on in the community for the quick attention of JWCL staff. And I must add that it is not only JWCL little staff who work within these communities. We have district offices district managers who are also on these WhatsApp platforms. So issues relating to water supply, downtimes, quality issues are put on these platforms, and our district managers pick them up and detail people to go and solve them. So we have there's a close-knit relationship between JWCL and the communities that benefit from our initiatives. Thank you.
Faustina, thanks very much for that. Kevin has also replied, also from his own experience, because he's not just a moderator, he's also a low-income community expert in Kenya, that quality control for services contracted out to CBOs, there must be a clear contract stating the role of each party and the do's and don'ts there. And I do think this is an area where operators have an amazing amount of experience and knowledge about how they're working with communities and community-based operators, also that they stand to share with one another. Funita, I see you have your hand up. Last one to you, and then we'll hand it over to Hannah. Please go ahead.
Sorry, Julie.
Sorry, did I get cut off? Sorry. I was saying, you had your hand up. Did you have one final remark to make before we send it to Hannah? No, I think
that question has already been answered. So that is fine. Yeah, we can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. I'd like to hand over now to Hannah Crichton from WaterAid, who will give us a wrap up. And I will ask Hannah to kindly introduce herself, because I'm sorry I don't have her bio information in front of me, but I know she has a lot of experience in water and sanitation. She's worked in Ethiopia and other places, and she's a senior policy expert, if I'm not mistaken, at WaterAid in London. Hannah, anything to compliment about your introduction, and then you please go ahead and wrap up.
Thanks, Julie. Yeah, no, my name's Hannah Crichton-Smith, and I'm the Senior Advisor for Systems Strengthening based in the Programme Support Unit in WaterAid. Thank you so much for a fantastic conversation. I've tried my very best to capture what has been said, but I must say it's been so rich that I apologise if I've missed anything key, but we will write this up and share it with you all. So we had a very good background to the issue, that Gonzalo mentioned, rapidly growing inequality, particularly in Argentina. Faustina raised the issue of, failing sectoral and financial reforms that have impacted on the ability of the most vulnerable people to benefit from subsidies. Tied with that is the issue of climate change, but recognizing that even before climate change comes into play, vulnerable people are experiencing a poor level of service already, or no service at all, and climate change will exacerbate that. So we had a very good overview of the background of the issue. We going on to kind of more recommendations, and apologies, my notes are here to the left, so I'm looking over here. We talked about the need to put the most vulnerable people at the core and the center of our WOPs, recognizing that historically or more traditionally, utilities have focused on the technical business side of things and perhaps have put less focus on this. That WOPs themselves are an advocacy tool for raising awareness of this important issue, and that alone is a way of raising the need to reach the most marginalized people on the agenda and securing buy-in from senior management who are needed to make sure that the most vulnerable people are reached. I think one thing that we've all the speakers touched upon is really that need to look at or situate WOPs within broader efforts to strengthen WASH systems as a whole. That was a key thing that I think came out quite strongly. And when we talk about WASH systems, talking about the legal, regulatory frameworks, the policies that are needed to be in place, as well as the community demand and that sense of voice to demand for better services, to feel like they have a voice in the services they get, involved in how the provision of services that they receive, either collecting data or being engaged in community feedback mechanisms. So really looking at that broader system and making sure that we're working with key institutions, organizations, people who have the power to raise this, the agenda of this topic. So that links on very much to the issue of partnerships and collaborations, understanding who's already working on these issues or parts of the problem that we can collaborate with as part of our WOPs. So civil society organizations, NGOs, we've talked a lot about. Gonzalo again also mentioned the links with universities, research institutes to get the data needed to target investment to areas that are needed most. To think about kind of financial models of what works, where, in which context. So really looking at all the various different partnerships from regulators, research institutes, civil society, and critically key government stakeholders and senior politicians, senior people in utilities as well, to drive this agenda forward. We also touched a lot on documenting and capturing not best practice necessarily, but examples that have worked well in different contexts, and sharing that learning, sharing those models and approaches that have worked to learn from each other. And that's really where these WOPs, I think, come in. And we talked about that. Faustina mentioned that, that learning exchange. It's about an opportunity to share new perspectives from different contexts on what's working, and it is very much an exchange on both sides, not necessarily just about a one-way capacity building exercise. So I think that's a real value of the WOP in raising the importance of this issue, and finding ways of what works where. A couple of challenges were raised that we are still sticking with. I think we need maybe a bit more time to explore. Rolene mentioned, the issue of if we do invest in these low income areas and we improve these services, then is there a risk that, you know, these vulnerable people will ultimately be pushed out? And what does that mean? And what can we be doing to be mindful of that and safeguard people so that doesn't happen? So working with landlords and again governments to ensure that doesn't happen. And also Gonzalo mentioned towards the end the challenge around changing people's behavior towards paying for water. Why would you want to pay when you've been getting water for free? So really we have a role to play in creating the messages about what would be the benefit of paying for a good quality service. So I think that's something we can all take away with us. And finally, I guess, we won't achieve SDG 6 if we don't reach the most marginalized people, the most vulnerable people. We also won't achieve SDG 6 if their access is not sustainable. So really thinking about the two in parallel. How can we institutionalize what we do to achieve that sustainable access for the most marginalized people and achieve that at scale? And I think WOPs, you know, are a great tool, a great mechanism through which to do that. So yeah, I'd just like to say thank you very much. And I'll pass back to Julie.
Thanks, Hannah. Excellent wrap up. That was so well summarized, and you drew out a lot of insights that we'll be taking forward for sure in the community of practice. For one, that we are working on with the EU WOP program and the Waterworks program, and that we're hoping to very shortly open up to a wider group. So people who are interested in this topic and would like to join with us. Coming up next is a short video to indicate to you how you can continue engaging with us on this topic. Thank you very much to all. It was a pleasure, and have a great afternoon, evening, day. Bye.
What? Already over? No, we have plenty more options to continue the discussions and peer exchange beyond the Congress.
Tell me more. What are the options?
Well, SHIWOPA membership, for example. By becoming a member of SHIWOPA, everyone can connect to a global alliance of practitioners and experts. There are two ways of becoming a member. First, institutional members. Institutions can participate in SHIWOPA's assemblies and are eligible to run and vote in its international steering committee elections. Or second, individual members. Individuals can connect and engage with peers in the online SHIWOPA community. We have created a space that allows for networking and easy communication. Meet future WOP partners, stay up to date on project opportunities, and participate in peer-to-peer learning opportunities.
Sounds great. How can I join?
Simply go to www.shiwopa.org and register for free. If you want to know more, you can follow SHIWOPA on social media and subscribe to the newsletter. Thanks for joining the 4th Global WOPs Congress. We'll see you soon.